He actually came first thing in the morning, just before sunrise, and the one flash that fired correctly lit his face. But where it was almost a mistake is I actually had adjusted it for a nighttime exposure only. When I came in, looked on the back of the camera, it looked like trash. I was like, oh no, I just screwed up this photo. I'd love to be able to tell you, hey, this was exactly how I crafted it, but unfortunately that wasn't the case.
Welcome to Bird Burger, where we talk about all things wildlife and nature oriented. Wildlife photography is often thought of by the big bazooka lenses that we carry around on the ends of our tripods or our rig setups in order to capture shots of the wildlife. But occasionally we see people break out of these molds by using wide angle lenses, motion detection setups, and flashes, stuff like this, in order to capture shots using camera traps of wildlife. So today we're going to be talking about the skills and the techniques that you need in order to grow in your camera trapping skills with awesome wildlife photographer Neil Jernigan. Neil, thanks for being on today.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. Yeah,
you have some awesome stuff, dude. I love watching your stuff, as I was kind of mentioning to you before, because it's a world that I know almost nothing about. Like a lot of the podcast guests that I bring on, I feel like I have a decent amount of knowledge on all those topics. But camera trapping, something completely foreign to me. So I feel like just as much as our audience is going to learn today, I'm probably going to be learning. So very cool.
Cool deal. Yeah, it's definitely a unique perspective and a unique take on wildlife photography. That's for sure.
So I guess just to start out, for those who don't know, what is camera trapping and how is it different from kind of like this standard sort of wildlife photography that most people do?
Sure. So camera trapping, in its simplest form, is just leaving a camera, whether it's a trail camera, a DSLR, or a mirrorless camera, out in the woods, waiting for an animal to walk by to trigger some sort of sensor to then trigger the camera. So it's essentially working just like a trap. It can be anything from a GoPro, a camera that costs just a couple $100, all the way up to as much as you want to invest in it. And so it's really any camera that's lying in wait, waiting for an animal to trip the sensor.
So what kind of gear is kind of the basic setup of a camera trap type of look?
Yeah, so I use DSLR cameras, and the awesome thing about camera trapping is you can invest as much as you want or as little as you want.
Yeah.
And so I started out with Canon Rebels. So I could pick up an older Canon Rebel T5 or T6 on eBay for just a couple $100. You don't have to go out and spend thousands on full frame cameras. And with a kit lens, just a very simple kit lens. And pretty much all you need is a camera, a flash, and a sensor. And so there's a couple different types of sensors that are out there. But that's really all you need. Just a camera, a housing for it, a flash, a housing for it, and then a sensor. And a little bit of knowledge to help you along the way, that's for sure.
Yep, I bet. That's the hard part, right? I think that's cool. Like, even talking about like wildlife photography, and often it's such an expensive hobby, largely because the camera body itself, but also because of the lens, often
the big
can
lenses,
be even more expensive than the camera body. So I think that is cool. Something that's really cool about camera trapping is you can kind of come in with a much lower budget price, like what you even said, a kit lens.
Definitely.
You can't do other types of wildlife photography with the kit lens. It's very, very difficult. So that's very cool.
Yeah, definitely.
I really liked in a recent video, you had this video where you were in the snow, and I know it doesn't get to kind of snow for you a lot in North Carolina, but you were in the snow, and it was cool just watching you kind of like observe these different patterns in nature, whether that was, the footsteps in the snow or just these markings of animals coming by certain areas. I guess my question would be, what sort of things are you looking for out in the environment when you're kind of working to set up these types of shots?
Yeah, definitely. So when you put a camera out in the woods, you can't just place it in a random spot. I mean, there's several things I look for. So obviously tracks in the snow, which was the most beneficial thing about having snowfall. But really just look for animal signs. So I look for travel corridors, highways that are in the woods, scat. Anything, any kind of sign that an animal's been there or frequents an area. And then I usually deploy trail cameras, and I'll attach them to trees, trail cameras, game cameras, A lot of people call them camera traps. Technically, they are camera traps too. But I'll put them on the trees in an area where I think animal activity is high, or it could be a good location for a camera trap. And so in all my trail cameras, I record just video only. And so that way, you know, if an animal is using a trail or goes around a certain tree, trying to find an area where I can really narrow down where an animal is actually putting its feet. That way I can make sure when my camera is there that it's going to trigger the sensor and get the photo that I'm after. Really, it's just looking for animal signs. So just looking for as much sign as possible in the woods to make sure you get a really higher success rate with your images.
That's good stuff. It sounds like, too, it's almost like this two-step process in a way of like capturing them on the trail cameras sometimes and kind of like analyzing those patterns from there. You have like, it's kind of this general specific area that you're looking at. You set up a trail camera, see the exact kind of pathways it's walking, and then you're kind of in stage 2 where you're actually getting the shot you were hoping for. Is that kind of right in analyzing it?
Yeah, definitely. So a little bit of a backstory. An image that I've been after for about 6 years I've not captured yet, and it's actually a bobcat scent marking a tree. And how I got the idea was I had a trail camera up in the woods recording video, and the cat walked the trail, and it went about 50 yards further past the trail camera, and it went up to a tree, scent marked the tree, and I would have never known it if the trail camera was just taking pictures.
Yeah.
And so it was a 30-second video, and so I watched him go off in the distance and scent mark the tree, and I was like, that's the shot I want.
That's the tree, yeah.
So I'm still working on that. I still go to that tree, and you can actually smell where the cat has scent marked the tree. Wow. And so I still go to that tree, and it's kind of like a community thing. Any animal that walks by a stump, or most time a stump, and they scent mark on it, whether it's a squirrel or bobcat or coyote, everything pees on it. Yeah. And so you know, it's like a community bathroom that everybody uses. And so it's really interesting. You can get a lot of really cool photos at a spot where all the animals come and kind of scent mark the same stump. So
community bathroom. Yeah.
That's it.
I love it. I love that definition. Man, patience. Talk about patience though. 6 years to try to get a shot like that. That's no joke. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So the fun part about camera trapping is, you know, I do wildlife photography. I consider it full-time, but I also have a full-time 9-to-5 job, Monday through Friday. So while I'm at work or, you know, out, I have 3 or 4 cameras running for me 24/7. So I've always got something to go check and hopefully get a picture so they can be working for me while I'm doing other things.
Yep.
But yeah, the bobcat, I call it the bobcat saga because they're always teasing me. They're always coming really close to the camera and either, you know, not getting the exact shot I want or being just out of focus. But it took me a little over a couple of years to find an actual good location that a bobcat was using frequently. Yeah. And then it took me a year to get one photo.
Yeah. Wow.
So, because where I live, you know, it's eastern North Carolina, and, you know, it's not large tracts of woods. It's kind of small woodlands here and there, kind of scattered. So a bobcat, you know, could have a home range of up to 10 square miles. So you have to catch him as he's coming through every week or every other week. Wow. And so sometimes you get lucky and you get the shot you're after really quick, but most of the time it's a big waiting game. And it makes you have a lot of heartbreaks and a lot of upset. You get mad, you think, why do I do this? But when you do get that photo, it makes it so worth it. Yeah. So rewarding to do it.
Oh man, yeah, I'll actually ask you a question about that in a little bit about the bobcats, because man, you got some fantastic images of a bobcat that once. So I'll save that for just a second. Yeah, I'm kind of curious to know right now, because you were talking about this a little bit earlier too, about just patience and all this stuff. Since you can only rush the process so much in camera trapping, right? Like it's a very slow, tedious process, at least is what it seems like from the outside. Yeah. What's the balance that you find between kind of this, like, okay, like I'm going to leave my camera here for 3, 4, 6 months versus like switching these locations? Is there a good balance that you've found between like trying new locations consistently versus like just keeping it in the same spot for who knows how long?
Yeah, it really depends on, number one, the subject, and the final, like the image I have in my mind. That really kind of dictates what how long I leave a camera somewhere. So, kind of an example, during the winter, all the trees have lost the foliage, so I can actually get stars in the photos. So I transition to those types of photos during the wintertime, to try to capture as much natural and available light, and try to pull in the star detail with the animals, whether it's a beaver on a beaver dam or a fox, anything that walks past it. I shoot long exposures to capture the starlight that's coming through. So most of the time during the winter, that's what I go for. So it could be a couple months. There's a certain image I've been wanting, a raccoon on a log, with the moon in the frame. So it's only going to happen once 1 week a month. So that I have the opportunity to get. I hadn't gotten that yet, but I did get a beaver on the beaver dam. With a moon in the background. So most of the time, that's really what determines where I put my cameras, how long they're there, and so really it's just the subject and what I'm wanting that's within the frame. So it's it could be simple. I can put something up that maybe for like a squirrel and say, all right, I'm going to do 2 weeks and that's it. I'm only going to do, because squirrels are very frequent animals. They'll use one trail every day, multiple times a day. So I could say 2 weeks for that and I'm done. Whereas the beaver dam, everything crosses the beaver dam. Turkeys, foxes, coyotes, bobcats, otters, ducks. So that would be a more long-term project, because I'm not discriminating against any of the species. Whatever I can capture in the frame, I'll take it. And then there's some where I say, all right, this is going to be a bobcat or a coyote set. This is what I want, and I'll leave it until I get the photo. So
that's good stuff. You've gotten some fantastic stuff on that beaver dam. So a lot of your images on that.
That one, that was a pleasant surprise. I never expected to see so many different species use the beaver dam. Which goes back to proving the point that beavers are a keystone species. They benefit a variety of wildlife.
No, that's so good. So I'm going to pop up here that image that you took of the bobcat at midnight, and just beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous image where you got like this moon kind of like feeling like it's backlighting this bobcat. Just an incredible scene. I'd love to kind of just use this picture. We were talking about it earlier too, but use this picture as kind of like maybe an specific example of, can you kind of walk through the process of how you captured an image like this? Because my opinion, this is maybe my favorite of all the images you've taken. It's just phenomenal. So I'd love to kind of figure out about that.
So, fun story. It was almost a complete accident. So I'd love to be able to tell you, hey, this is exactly how I crafted it. I did the light just like this. But in reality, so this is on the beaver dam, and the bobcat was walking across the beaver dam, and this was the third frame of the series. So the first photo, he's looking straight ahead. The next frame, he actually looks towards the camera because he hears the shutter, and in the third, he glances up at the light, which is the one you're talking about. And so he actually came first thing in the morning, just before sunrise, and so that gives it that really like full moon lighting effect. And the one flash that fired correctly lit his face. But where it was almost a mistake is I actually had adjusted it for a nighttime exposure only, and most of my camera traps I set them up to do daytime and nighttime. And so, but this one I had changed it last minute, just a couple days before, to only photograph at night, and so it was a long exposure. And so when I came in, looked on the back of the camera, it looked like trash. I was like, oh no, I just screwed up this photo. But luckily there was enough information there in the raw file that I was able to save it and bring it back down. So like I said, I'd love to be able to tell you, hey, this was exactly how I crafted it, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. And that happens all the time. You'll have a camera out there for say 2 or 3 months with the exact same thing same settings. Okay, I'm going to switch it up just a little bit, and then of course that's when
Yep.
the animal that you're after comes in, and then it's all changed and messed up.
Wow, isn't that real though? Like, wildlife photography is so much like this weird in between of
Yes.
like, half the time it's really just a lot of preparation, a lot of
Yes.
work to be able to get this shot that you're
Yes.
envisioning, but then half the time it just happens and you're like, man, like,
Yep,
it was
exactly.
only this easy all the time.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
So
have
that's cool.
a flip side to that story. So recently, I've had a very specific image in my mind with a bobcat, and I just captured it this week. I've not released.
Wow.
I've not released the image yet because I'm still making sure I'm 100% happy before I let the world see it. But it's
Yep.
a bobcat on a log under the stars at night, and it's probably one of my favorite photos. Like, I love the photo of the one we're just talking about on the beaver dam, but the one that I just got is a very close second, just because it's a very wide angle perspective. So the bobcat's very small in the frame, but he's in a sea of darkness with the stars coming through, and that shot I've been after for about 2 months. So I actually succeeded in that one pretty quick.
Yeah.
I was hoping to get it before the leaves started growing back, so to get it in just a couple months, I'm really pumped about it. So I'm excited for it.
Wow. Well, yeah, congrats on that. And I'm hyped. I'm excited to see that photo. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
That should be cool. Talking about some of your videos again, on your kind of year in review 2021, which I thought was really cool, by the way. I love that video
Appreciate
and
it,
how
yeah.
you kind of compiled it together. It's very cool. It's just impressive to watch, just the amount of dedication required, because it's so much, I know, of this behind the scenes work that, as opposed to other types of wildlife photography, probably just, it's a lot more like, I don't know if like grinding at it is the right word, but it's a lot of just doing it and just putting in the hours, putting in the time, just to constantly be checking these things, repositioning, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
And even just, I was getting a kick out of like watching you, because I know the struggle as a YouTuber of like setting up your
Oh,
camera
yeah.
angles and then walking by the
Yes.
camera, and I was getting a kick out of
Yeah.
like watching you walk by these angles in the swamp water, and I'm like, man, I complain when I gotta walk, like 30 feet past the camera on dry ground, and this guy's like trekking through swamp water to
Yep.
set up these camera angles of himself. But yeah, what kind of drives you, I guess, to do all this stuff, just to kind of like persevere through these this I don't know, state of mind of just constantly just working at these camera images and just kind of grinding through this process, as opposed to other things that might feel a little bit more instantly satisfying? What is it that kind of motivates you to do this long form technique?
I'm glad you asked this question, because I just recently come up with the answer myself. So I've been wondering why myself, and so
Yeah.
when I first got started in photography, I went to school for photography. That's after I graduated high school, I jumped in face first for photography courses at a college, and that's where I learned to shoot film. And I think it reminds me of that. It's actually, it feels like I'm actually creating something. So there's definitely no instant gratification. You can kind of see on the back of the camera when you first set the camera up what it potentially could look like. But like we were saying earlier, I mean, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 6 months before I ever get the photo. And I just really enjoy the process. I thoroughly enjoy it. And it reminds me of shooting film back in the day, when you had to work hard. You did everything like you're supposed to in camera before you press the shutter back then, because every time you press the shutter, it actually cost you money. And so you make sure everything was right. And so it's kind of the same thing. So I visit my camera traps twice a week, most of the time on like Sundays and Wednesdays, but really whenever I can. And yes, I'm going through the swamp 2 or 3 times a week, with waders on, 50-pound backpack most days, just because you have to bring everything in, because you never know when something maybe is messed up. And I just enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoy it. And I just get a kick out of having an image in my mind and say, you know what, I want to try to get that. That's what I want to try to get. And it takes a lot of persistence. You gotta have patience, but you really gotta have a lot of persistence, and just kind of empower through it. Because there's a lot of times when you take a look at a particular photo. This is what I want, and you just don't get it. Like I said, I've been after the bobcat scent marking a tree since 2014, and I've not gotten it yet. Now I'm going to get it. I will get it. Just I don't know when just yet.
I believe you.
But no, I just enjoy it. Plain and simple, I just thoroughly enjoy it. Anything outside in the woods with wildlife and a camera, I'm down. I'm ready for it.
What was kind of the moment, I'm curious, that you kind of discovered that you prefer this camera trapping style over this kind of standard wildlife photography sort of style?
So I started photographing wildlife. I do, and see, a lot of people don't realize it at the moment, but I do a lot of black bear photography and workshops with that. And so I'm always out in the field with either clients or by myself photographing bear or geese or birds. But with camera trapping, again, it's just the process that I just thoroughly enjoy. And really it happened in 2020 when the world kind of slowed down and stopped. That was kind of the form, because most of my camera traps are within a mile or two of my house currently, and so I could walk to these if I wanted to. And so, and it just goes back to I just enjoy the process. There's certain shots that I want to get that I'm just actively trying to capture, and I just the more I put cameras out in the woods and I wait, I just know one day I'll be able to get the shot. It's just like regular wildlife photography. You can't get it by not doing it. If you've got a picture in your mind of, say, a grizzly bear in Alaska, hey, you got to go to Alaska to get it. So it's the same kind of thing. Just put the cameras out, put in the work, and if you have a little bit of luck, maybe it'll work out for you. So I just love it all. I just really enjoy it.
So for those just starting out, is there like an easy kind of way to practice camera trapping, or an easy type of species to start on maybe, or what would you kind of recommend?
Yeah, so you can get started like what we talked about earlier with the very basic equipment. But something that you really need is a sensor. So you have to have something that trips the camera. So it sees motion. It works just like the Ring doorbell, really, or motion detect lights on your house. Same kind of system works for most sensors. So you're going to need a sensor, and you can practice at home. When I first got started in it, how I would craft my lighting is I would use pets. I'd set my camera trap up in the backyard, and I'd let my dog walk in between the camera and the sensor and the lights and take test shots. That's how I was able to see how everything worked and how far I needed my lights to be positioned, how high up. And so you could practice literally in your backyard to really hone in on the craft before deploying an official trap out in the woods. So you can definitely do it in your backyard. You don't have to have crazy amount of wildlife in your area. Literally raccoons. There's some of the best camera trappers in the world are doing urban wildlife photography. So I mean, you can do it with anything, really.
Yeah,
put it up on your trash can and see if you get any raccoons coming into it. So.
Yeah, there you go. Work as double as not only an art but a security detection system.
Yeah, exactly.
Too.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Yeah, that's good stuff. How do you feel like you get better at camera trapping yourself now that you've kind of, you're past this beginner stage, obviously, and you've gotten to a place where you're good at it? How do you feel like you continue to grow through camera trapping? Kind of, I guess, what's that process look like for you?
Yeah, so it's just like regular photography, whether it's wildlife, wedding, portrait, constantly learning. You're always learning little tips and tricks, what to do, what not to do. And it's also just like talking to other camera trappers. So there's a lot of online forums for camera trapping. There's Facebook groups. There's 2 or 3 forums I can think of right off the top of my head that people are always leaning on one another. And you may know exactly how things work, but if you hear it from someone else and their perspective, you're like, oh, okay, that's actually a little easier, or that will help me do this. And so you're always learning. That's another part that I enjoy, and it's just the challenge of it. So there's a lot of times, a certain shutter speed, and equivalent aperture just may not work for this particular situation, and so you're always learning what works best for what lighting situation. And you can get started really with just knowing 3 settings on your camera. I mean, you don't have to have the technical skills, of the top portrait photographer in the world. The biggest learning curve is going to be with the lights. When you start incorporating multiple lights, that's going to be the biggest learning curve. And that's what I enjoy. I love throwing in 5 or 6 different off-camera lights in one setup and learning how they all work together to capture what I'm after. So definitely always learning, that's for sure.
Yeah, in our first video we ever released on Bird Burger, I asked a couple different wildlife photographers kind of what the single most important thing was that they recommend in wildlife photography. And I've liked to ask that question to a couple of different people I brought on my podcast since then. Since camera trapping is a totally different world, I'd love to kind of hear your input of, if you had to choose one thing for camera trapping, wildlife photography, what would kind of be your biggest piece of advice that you'd give out there?
It would probably be similar to other wildlife photographers about patience and persistence. But you got to have the drive to do it. But the biggest thing that I can say that I think would help anybody get started is just know your subject. If you know your subject, you'll get the photos, plain and simple. And that's whether it's with camera traps or with telephoto lenses. If you know your subject, you'll get the shot that you want. That's for sure.
Yeah,
so do your homework.
Even. Do your homework. There you go. That's a statement right there. Do your homework, guys. I love it. Well, awesome, man. Thanks for coming on. Is there any big projects you got that you're working on right now? Anything very cool? I mean, it sounds like you just got a Bobcat image. So it's pretty cool.
So I'll be releasing that photo and video very soon. But no, right now it's just all personal projects that I'm working on. I do a lot of black bear photography, and so that is the #1 goal for this year, is to start camera trapping black bear. And so I've been building an arsenal of cameras and lenses because bears love to destroy stuff. So I just know that's going to happen when I dive into that. So, but yeah, that's probably the #1 thing I want to get into this year, is start photographing some black bear with the camera traps. So, I document it all on YouTube, so it'll definitely. The camera will be there looking on for that too. So,
yep, that's some intense stuff, dude. That's awesome. Yep, a lot of species knowledge going into that. I'm sure a lot of investment. It sounds like financially going into that.
Yep, definitely.
That's cool. Well, make sure you guys go check out Neil's YouTube channel to help fund that kind of camera trap thing, because it sounds like it's going to be costing a little bit.
Yep, definitely. I may have to create a Patreon.
Yeah, exactly. Just for that. Just a black bear allowance right there.
Yep, exactly.
But yeah, go make sure you check him out. It has some awesome stuff. Make sure you guys subscribe to Bird Burger below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.